I want to talk today about gender equality and the lack thereof in Jehovah's Witness organization. Jehovah's Witnesses, the organization itself is a patriarchal organization, and that's defined as a system where men are in authority over women in all aspects of their society. And Jehovah's Witnesses are a patriarchal religion, organization. And patriarchy, like most forms of oppression and discrimination, is this. It has a way of trying to convince us that things are the way they are because they have to be that way. That's the way they've always been, and there's no alternatives. They can't change because, in their case, it's Jehovah's way, right? What happens, and so for you, those of you that haven't watched my videos, I'm ExJW. I'm a third generation Jehovah's Witness. Much of my family is still practicing active Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't follow any religion now, happily. So yeah, just a little back on me, just in case you haven't seen any other videos. So patriarchy. Christian patriarchy, it fails to recognize the huge diversity within each gender and pushes people into these prescribed slots that are based on their genitals rather than seeing people as individuals first. So as a woman, you're not actually able to hold any roles of responsibility. You're viewed as a helper of the man, and the man is the head of the household, both spiritually and physically. So as a Jehovah's Witness, as a woman and as a Jehovah's Witness, I mean, a lot of it you just feel unconscious to it because you're, from myself, you're born into it. So it's these things that, these ways of life that you're just like, this is how it is. And you read these scriptures that why a woman is under a man and man is under Christ and the Christ is under God, so this whole hierarchy, and woman is actually placed on the low part of it. So we'll get to that in a second, but so the question of should women be ministers, also why can't a woman speak in front of the congregation? Why can't a woman sit on a judicial committee? Can you imagine? For those of you that know, or don't know, so a judicial committee is made up of 3 people. They're always men, elders who from the congregation, and they're there to judge the sinner who is in front of them as to whether they should be disfellowshipped or lose their privileges or what have you. So this judicial committee is always 3 men, but can you imagine the difference it would make if a woman was actually part of that judicial committee? Just saying. Anyways, so moving on, the organization uses the thought that since the Bible describes 12 apostles of Jesus as being all male, this is why the oversight in the congregation is all male. So I dug out my old reasoning from the scriptures book, which is published, for those of you that don't know this, published from the Jehovah's Witnesses Society. So the reasoning book, the actual question, should women be ministers? And when I read this today, I was like, it's almost shocking. It's almost a shocking verbiage that they use. Okay, but I'm going to read it to you. So hold on. Women, this is directly quoted, okay? Women are counseled to learn in silence with full submissiveness at congregation meetings, and that they do not raise questions challenging the men in the congregation. The women are not to speak at such meetings if what they might say would demonstrate lack of subjection. Wow. I know, it's crazy talk, right? Okay. The next quote, also on the same question, should women be ministers? So, although women make valuable contributions to the activity of the congregation, there's no provision for them to preside or to take the lead by instructing the congregation when qualified men are present. So, this comes from page 433 of the Reasoning from the Scriptures book. I'm always stunned by the language, like learn in silence with full submissiveness. Ugh. Not to speak at meetings in case it's a lack of subjection to men. It's horrible. So, moving on. How did this feel for a woman in a patriarchal religion, aka my experience as a Jehovah's Witness? Well, as some of you who might be watching, if you are from the Jehovah's Witness religion, if you're a woman, you might feel what I felt. I always knew my place. I always knew I was second to man, no matter what a man would say. Even if I was like, inside you, just like stuff that down because you're not really, you shouldn't speak out because you're being rebellious and not submissive, right? I'm still actually trying to deprogram that out of myself, and I catch myself every once in a while, like in different relationships that I've been in, where I was like, wow, like I kind of step back and I hold my thoughts or my opinions to myself because I was like, worried that what I'm saying and how it's going to come across, but then I'm catching myself. So it is kind of interesting that programming that is so instilled in us from that religion. I'd love to hear your comments on that if any of you have had the same type of awakening. So back to this whole thing as women being ministers. Can they be ministers? All right, well, what if a man's not available? Okay, so what if this qualified man isn't available to, for instance, lead a field group in service or to say a prayer in front of, it's usually field service. So field service going, door to door and whatever they do is field service nowadays, putting up stands in high traffic areas. I wish I was Jehovah's Witness now just for that. It'd be so much easier than door knocking. But anyways, that's a side point. All right, so what if a man's not available to take the lead at one of these special field service meetings? Well, I looked up that too because I was like, what do they say about that? I'm trying to remember. And so it's all about the setting as to whether a head covering is needed. So yes, for those of you that don't know this about Jehovah's Witnesses and women, this gender equality bit, you do need to wear a head covering. If there's, you're at a field service group, the woman that's taking the lead, because there's no qualified men, for her to actually be doing this, she needs to wear a head covering. If there's a man present, that he's not a qualified spiritual man, so he's not baptized probably. The other one is if she's praying for more than one person. So if she's praying in front of, 2 or more people, she should have a head covering in this whole thing. And so this goes back to the headship arrangement that the JW organization holds so dear. And they always refer to 1 Corinthians 11, where the head of man is Christ, the head of woman is man, head of Christ is God. And then they go on, every woman that prays or prophesies with her head uncovered shames her head. And so for a man, he ought not to have his head covered, for he is God's glory and he's God's image. But the woman was created for the sake of the man. It's kind of shock talk, really. It is. So back to, the head coverings thing. So for those of you that didn't know this, yes, there you go. Now you know something. Jehovah's Witnesses do a head covering thing. You don't see it often, and I'll tell you a little experience of when I was, I remember this time where I was at a field group or a field service meeting where there weren't any men, but there's probably about 10 women, and you see that often where I mean, there's probably more women than men, quite honestly, in Jehovah's Witness organization. I don't know that for sure, but I'd love to actually hear if there's a stat out there. I haven't come across that before, but I was just thinking that that's probably the case, because when you go into a congregation, most times the attendance is primarily female. Anyways, if anyone of you know that, I'd love to see that in the comments. All right. So what was I saying? So back to, the roles and the head covering. Yes. So women, they're actually not allowed to give talks in front of a congregation. They're only allowed to do a talk in an illustrated setting, such as if you're in the ministry or doing a Bible study. So a setting would be like, I'm doing a Bible study. In the setting, I'm trying to reason from the scriptures about whatever. There's millions. They give you a lot of different topics that you can choose from to talk about in your talk as a sister from the stage. And that typically is two sisters who, one's your partner, where you do the talk and then you give the script to your partner to, then you kind of go back and forth. So it's kind of like a play. I've done countless. I've done it ever since those kind of talks for as long as I can remember. So, but I always wanted to be able to speak in front of the congregation. I'm like, why? And I actually had a brother say to me one time, he's like, well, if you or the sisters, it'd be so distracting for men to actually, for the brothers, he didn't say men, he said for the brothers to actually see, the sisters up there. And I'm like, why? It was such a weird comment, but that's not scriptural. I think he was trying to be he was trying to be flattering, but it kind of came across as a little creepy because he was older than my father. But anyways, so that was a side point. So yeah, giving talks. Yeah, you're not allowed to actually stand in front of the congregation. That's only for men. You can sit or stand with another sister in front of a mic and you do a play, like I just kind of mentioned, about, being in field service or whatever. So yeah, women are they're underrepresented in any decision-making processes that shape this society, shape their own lives, shape this religion and organization. And this pattern of inequality, it's a constraint to the progress of this society because it limits the opportunities to one half of its population. I think it's horrible. And having lived it, I'm really happy not to have not to have that in my life anymore. Because the effects on this type of hierarchy on women, I mean, you suffer from low self-esteem and confidence. I've struggled with that a lot through my life, and a lot of it does stem back to, coming from a patriarchal organization and religion where you are put in your place. It goes back to the man is the head of the woman, and that whole thing. Women be submissive and be a dutiful wife and don't speak out at meetings, and you have to be really careful about what you question even. So these effects, feeling like you're not enough, feeling like you're lower, you have no voice, you don't have an opinion, you stuff that down until you're sick to your stomach probably. You're submissive, you're a dutiful wife, which both of those terms almost make it sound like, my dog, and how he behaves for me, which I love him. But, that's not an equal, it's not an equal setting whatsoever. Not being able to have a say in business matters. And I saw this a lot. I saw this, experienced this from, as a kid, seeing my parents in business and seeing my grandparents in business and others that were in business and even in business matters where, you'd think that there would definitely be more of an equality there. There's not as a Jehovah's Witness, because the final say ends with man. So that's how that was too. Yeah, straight from birth, you're told, that you're subservient to men. You're their helper. You're their complement. They love that word complement, but it's not an equal word whatsoever. You don't feel as important as men. You always feel like they're more important. That what they have to say is more important. I don't feel that way now. I think I've deprogrammed enough. So yeah, those are the effects. I'd love to hear from you guys too, as to what your experiences were, having been in it and coming out of it, and that programming and reprogramming. I'm curious to hear your comments around that. And yeah, so I think I'll end there, just because I'm trying to keep my videos fairly on the short side, so that you're not trying to listen to this for an hour of rambling. So maybe I'll stop there. But yeah, so gender equality for any Jehovah's Witnesses that are watching this, which is probably a very low percentage, and I don't know that you're really allowed to be watching this in the first place. So, and please hold back from being mean on the comments. But anyway, so gender equality, I'll just tell you, does not mean that men and women become the same, because I have heard that before, where they say, well, there's obvious differences in men and women. Women can never be the same as men, and men can never be the same as women. Well, yeah, duh. We know that. But what it means, gender equality, what that means is that access to opportunities isn't dependent or constrained by the sex. That's it. So, equal opportunities. That's it. That's it. So, that's it. And I know I said it too many times, but I'd love to hear your comments, experiences around this. Thanks for watching again. And if you like this, thanks for the thumbs up and subscribe. I'm planning to do a video each weekend. I'm trying to figure this out my schedule. So I appreciate your comments around that. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.